It's back into it in Chester. Here's El Senior. Yes! Yes!
The center back, Jacob Glesnes.
He's going for it.
Yes! Oh my goal! What a goal!
And that will do it. One of the best comebacks in recent years. 3 unanswered by the Union. And they go into the Gold Cup break, winning it 3-2.
Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and it has been a hot minute since we have last recorded a podcast. You guys will all know the last podcast we recorded was our thoughts on the MLS Cup final between LAFC and Philadelphia Union. And a couple weeks have passed, days have passed, and like Jim Curtin mentioned yesterday in his end of the season press conference, he said, I still have not went back and rewatched that game. I cannot go back and rewatch that game. And I'm sure a lot of you guys feel the same way too. A lot of you guys probably will not rewatch that game. Me, myself, I've not rewatched that game. And it's because we all know how that game ends and everything. But in this episode will be us talking about my 5 takeaways from Friday's end of the season press conference with Ernst Tanner and Jim Curtin. And Jim Curtin and Ernst Tanner, they both open up their statements saying how the season was a success. And if you guys remember, a few weeks ago, I asked on Twitter Spaces, when we did a live Twitter Spaces, if the Union lose MLS Cup, would the season still be a success? And every guest I had on that show that answered that question, they all said that the 2022 season would be a success, even if the Union lost MLS Cup. And so I'm happy to see that Ernst Tanner and Jim Curtin both feel the same way. Because, like Ernst said, he didn't want to talk about any of the stats, any of the records that the Union broke, because we all know there were so many. And Ernst Tanner said the only way you top all of that is by winning MLS Cup. And of course, he said that's the goal next season. That's always the goal, is to win MLS Cup. And I was talking to my friend Kyle last week, I think it was. We were texting or 2 weeks ago. And we all love this roster. We all love the players that are on the Union's team. But what if, and we all know how good this team is, but what if the players we have on this team, what if we say, and this is only the start of something, and the word dynasty gets thrown around a lot, and I know to be considered a dynasty, you got to win trophies. But what the Union have done since Ernst Tanner has taken over as sporting director, we've seen the clear progression this team has made. Each and every year, they're getting closer and closer and closer to the ultimate goal of lifting MLS Cup. And this season, they finally reach MLS Cup. They don't win it, but they get a taste of it. They get a taste of, okay, from preseason to the final. This is what we have to do every single game. This is what we have to do in training. This is how we have to have our routine if we are to get back to MLS Cup. So the players know what it takes to get to MLS Cup, because the talk was, do these players know how to win playoff games? They checked that off the list in 2019. All right, well, can this team win the East? They didn't do that in 2021. They lost because of COVID. But then they do it this season against New York City. So yes, they know how to win the East. Now, do they know what it's like to play in an MLS Cup? They do. But what if these players, in 2-3 years, what if Ernst Tanner upgrades this roster to what it could potentially be? Better than what we saw in 2022. And I know that's hard to think about, but if you look at the way that Ernst Tanner has built this roster since he's taken over, he's upgraded every single position. He's upgraded a center back. He's upgraded a left-sided midfielder. He's upgraded both of our strikers. He's upgraded our number 10. He's upgraded our number 6. He's upgraded our left back. And that's it. We had the right back in place. We had the goalkeeper in place. We had the right-sided midfielder in place, but everything else, Ernst Tenner has come in here and clearly upgraded this roster. And again, I know it's probably hard to think about that, like, what more can you do to this roster? This roster is as good as it will ever be, some of you people might be thinking. But you just go back to 2019 and you look what Ernst Tanner has done every single year. He's got rid of key players and brought in better players. How many of you people thought that, getting rid of Jamiro Montero was a terrible idea? That, oh man, this roster is not going to be able to go any further without Jamiro Montero on it. And we see what they do in 2022. So, I am under the belief that this roster that we had in 2022, in 2 to 3 years, whatever roster that Ernst Tenner assembles will be better than this 2022 roster just because of the progression we've seen Ernst Tenner make year after year. And so, like I mentioned, we'll go ahead and talk about my 5 key takeaways. Ernst Tanner and Jim Curtin, it was a long press conference, 40 minutes. And if you guys want to listen to the whole thing, I believe it's on YouTube. I'll drop a link in the show notes for you guys to check out if you want to listen to the whole thing for yourself. A lot of interesting questions, a lot of great answers from Jim and Ernst. And number one we'll start off with is Jim Curtin and Ernst Tanner were asked, all right, well, next season, we know there's a ton of competitions. How many players do you guys plan on having on the roster next season? What kind of players do you plan on bringing in next season? And this is what Ernst Tanner had to say.
We need to do something, obviously, yeah. And, we are ahead of a very challenging season, playing in 4 different competitions next year. Part of they are overlapping, and then you face some international competition with our national teams in addition. So we are going to have a player pool consisting out of probably 27, 28 players. That's how we react, and if you know our numbers right now, so we are going to sign a center back, that's clear. We are going to sign probably an additional midfielder, and then we are probably to sign somebody for attack as well.
All right, so Ernst Tanner said it right there. 27 to 28 players we can expect to be on the Union's roster next season. And for people that aren't counting at home, keeping track of what their roster is currently at, the Union have 23 players currently on the roster, and they need a right-sided midfielder. Ale Bedoya, we know he's getting up there in age. Jack McGlynn, Jim Curtin mentioned later in this press conference that, yeah, Jack's not a left-sided midfielder. That's not his natural position. And we saw the replacement for Ale was Jack McGlynn. And if Jack's not comfortable on the left side, he's clear as day not comfortable on the right side. But he did a job, right? And so I would say that's definitely a priority. Ernst Tanner said a midfielder. It's got to be a right-sided midfielder coming in to split minutes with Ale Bedoya. Of course, Ale is going to be the captain. He's still going to get his minutes, still going to be the leader of this team. But you definitely got to go out there and bring a midfielder in that's going to split time with Ale, so we're not playing him every single game for every single minute. I think we need a backup 10, although Ernst Tanner did mention that why can't that be Quinn Sullivan's role next season? And that kind of leads me into my second takeaway we'll get to in a minute here, which is interesting, right? We all saw that, yeah, Quinn's really not a right-sided player in the diamond. That's not his natural position. You move him more centrally, it could potentially work, although Quinn played as a winger in the academy, so that is his natural position. And again, we'll get to point number 2 because Jim Curtin mentioned something that a lot of you guys, it's going to be music to your ears. You guys will not believe what Jim Curtin said. But I think Quinn Sullivan definitely is a talented player, because we've talked about it a couple times on this podcast where, yeah, the Union were 100% going to give Quinn Sullivan a homegrown contract because of how talented he is, even though the Union's first team don't play with wingers. But when you have a player like Quinn Sullivan that's that talented, you're going to give them a contract so you don't lose them for free. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Quinn Sullivan is that backup for Daniel Gazdag next season as a 10. I do think that we will probably see another attacking midfielder brought in for this roster, even though Ernst Tanner said, why can't I be Quinn? I just think Ernst Tanner's had a pretty good eye for a number 10. And who's to say that Daniel Gazdag is going to have the type of season that he just had in 2022 in 2023? We would all love it, right? But if you had a bet right now that Daniel Gazdag is going to score 26 goals next season, odds are he's probably not going to do that. If he does, that will be wonderful. I will be surprised. I'm sure a lot of you guys will be surprised, but I do think we need to bring in a backup for Daniel at the 10. And then I do think we probably need another striker too, with Cory Burke off to New York Red Bulls. And I do want to talk about that situation here real quick, because I've seen a lot of fans on social media that are really upset with this deal, that are blaming Ernst Tanner for letting Cory Burke walk away. But here's the thing, right? So Cory Burke had an option for 2023, and the Union declined that option. The one thing that I'm upset about is the Union protected Cory Burke in the expansion draft. And by the way, if you guys weren't paying attention to the expansion draft, the Union didn't lose any players. But the Union decided to protect Cory Burke because odds are, if they left him unprotected, St. Louis were going to draft Cory Burke. They need strikers. And even if they weren't going to keep him on the roster, then they could have sold Cory Burke to another team in MLS. And if the Union would have done that, they would have got $50,000 in GAM. And now, essentially, you get nothing for Cory Burke leaving as a free agent. And so what went down is the Union declined his option because Cory Burke was making $400,000 this season. And so I'm not sure what the option number was at for next season, but let's assume that it's at $400,000. And I wrote an article on my website, thefreekick.net, about a week ago, comparing Cory Burke's numbers to other strikers that were getting paid the same amount of money as him, and the strikers that scored the same amount of goals as Cory Burke last season, which was 7. And it's a very interesting article. Go ahead, check it out if you guys want to read it. But quickly summarize, there were 2 players last season that got paid half of what Cory Burke was making this season at $400,000. And they scored 7 goals as well. That was Daniel Rios of Charlotte. I know he scored 4 goals against us. That number is a little bit inflated. And then you had Ronaldo Cisneros, who plays for Atlanta. And he scored 7 goals on a terrible, terrible Atlanta United team. And so I'm sure part of that played into what Ernst Tanner was looking at Cory Burke's option and saying, look, there's 2 players that are getting paid a lot less than what we were paying you last season. And they had the same production as you. And so we're going to go ahead and decline that option, which I don't blame the Union at all. That's why we saw the Union trade Sergio Santos to Cincinnati, to get that huge contract off the books. I mean, you're not going to pay a backup striker over $800,000 just to be a bench option. The Union just aren't going to do that. And so if they did that to Sergio Santos, then you're going to go ahead and do the same to Cory Burke. Cory Burke had a fantastic season coming off the bench. It seemed like in the second half of the season, Cory Burke really understood his role, that, hey, the last 20, 30 minutes of the game, give you all. This is when we're going to bring you in. You're going to go at tired legs. And to his credit, he understood that. And towards the end of the season, yeah, Cory Burke was fantastic off the bench. But if you can get a player that's going to give you the same productivity for half the money you're paying Cory Burke, you're going to do that. And not to mention, the Union last season signed Cory Burke's replacement in Jose Riasco, the young Venezuelan, who was with U2 for most of the season. And if you guys aren't familiar with Jose Riesco, I had my good friend Jordan Floret, who's been on the podcast a couple times. Last season, I had him on the podcast to talk about Jose Riesco, what Union fans can expect out of him. And again, I can leave that episode in the show notes if you guys want to check that out. A very interesting episode where we talked about Jose Martinez, Jesus Bueno, and obviously Jose Riesco. And so Jose Riesco didn't light the world on fire with Union 2, but you gotta keep in mind that he's going to a brand new country. He's a young player. He's leaving his family behind in Venezuela. It's all new to him. And so to see such a young player leave the only country he's ever been in and come to a brand new country where the climate's a lot different than what he's used to. Of course, it's going to take time to adjust to that. And let's not forget the fact that Ernst Tanner had to convince Jay Sugarman to spend over $1 million, and the exact figure was $1.1 million, I believe it was. But nonetheless, spend that kind of money on a striker that's going to be a developmental project. Ernst Tanner had to convince him that Jose Riesco is the real deal. Yes, we went out and spent money on Mikel Uhre. Yes, we got Julian Carranza from Inter Miami, and those are going to be our guys. But odds are one of those guys are eventually going to leave. And let's go ahead and already have an upcoming striker on this roster in Jose Riesco. Because at the time, and still, the Union don't have a great track record of developing strikers through the academy. And so it made sense why we saw the Union go out and sign Jose Riesco for $1.1 million. 6'2", plays similar to how Cory Burke plays. Yeah, the one knock on him is at times he's not getting enough pressure on the ball. But again, he's young, new country, playing with the second team. And so it's going to take time to learn a brand new system. And so I think Jose Riesco is 100% going to be the replacement for Cory Burke next season. I wanted to ask this question in the press conference, but when you're doing it over Zoom and you allow media members to be in person, you're not going to go to Zoom. So I was not able to ask about Jose Riesco. And hopefully before the season starts, we'll get a chance to ask Jim Curtin, Ernst Tanner, somebody about Jose Riesco and hear about the plan with him going forward. But when you have a player that's similar body type as Cory Burke, yeah, I think he's the ideal replacement. But I know we just went on a tangent there. Let's go back to the fact that the Union declined Cory Burke's option, wanted to pay him less, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But Cory Burke got better offers from DC United and from New York Red Bulls. They offered him 2 guaranteed years plus an option. The Union were only offering a 1-year deal with less money. New York Red Bulls and DC United offered Cory Burke the chance to start, and they offered him the money that he was looking for. And can you blame Cory Burke for going after the money? No, because you get one career. He did not want to leave Philadelphia. The Union didn't force him out. They offered him a contract, but it wasn't at the salary he was looking for. All right, that's great. If somebody's offering what you want, odds are you're probably going to take it. And so I can't fault Cory Burke for, going after that 2+ guarantee years plus an option and the chance to start. And he had 2 offers from 2 teams where one, he's clear as day going to a better team in New York Red Bulls compared to DC United. And so, yeah, I think if I was Cory Burke, you have one career and they're giving you everything you're looking for. Why not take that deal? So, no, the Union did not force Cory Burke out. He wanted to stay in Philadelphia. He just wanted them to pay him more money than what they offered, and he wanted longer guarantees. And so my whole issue is the Union should have left Cory Burke unprotected. I guess maybe Ernst Tanner wasn't expecting Cory Burke to turn down their offer when they declined his option. But it happens, and like I said, I mean, there's nothing to panic about. They have his replacement in Jose Riasco, but Ernst Tanner said we will sign another attacker. He didn't say a forward; he said an attacker. So that could be a winger. That could be another number 10. We shall see. But you still have to bring in a third goalkeeper, which the union mentioned last week that they're in negotiations with Joe Bendick. So I would fully expect Joe Bendick to be back with the union. And then Ernst Tanner also mentioned there that they're going to bring in another center back. And that leaves me to point number 2, where Ernst Tanner and Jim Curtin were talking about tactical flexibility. And again, that's music to your ears because you guys were always complaining. Not all of you guys, but some of you were saying, "Oh, why doesn't Jim Curtin switch to this? Why is he so set in the 4-4-2 formation?" And this is what Jim Curtin had to say.
Having a little more tactical flexibility and playing maybe a 3-5-2 or a 3-4-3, whatever you want to call it, to get guys on the field that suit them. And that kind of leads into Jack McGlynn as well. He's a guy that, is he perfect for the left side of the diamond? It's probably, and he would tell you, that's not his perfect position. He does a damn good job at it, but him going out to the sidelines to defend in space is not something he enjoys. You know what I mean? That's not playing to his skill set. His skill set is to get on the ball, to break lines and different things. So that would require also maybe playing with 2 6s and having him get on the ball a little more and being a little more tactically flexible there. So those are 2 top talents. I think 2 guys that are going to be the next to go to Europe and play. Craig is another one who would benefit from maybe a 3-back system and getting more minutes because sometimes the guys in front of you are just damn good, and that happens in soccer. It's happened to Matt Real at left back. Jose's done a great job at the 6. You have center backs that are playing well that take up a lot of the minutes. So maybe that tactical flexibility is what gets guys more minutes and gets them going and maybe even is better for them on the field, if that makes any sense to you guys.
Yeah, right away, you have Paxton Aronson, who I don't think we talked about the last couple of weeks, getting sold to Frankfurt for $4 million plus a lot of add-ons, plus a sell-on fee that's over 20%, I've been told. And so the Union get a hell of a deal out of Paxton Aronson. But you guys will remember when I talked about on this podcast, the next homegrown that I expected to be sold was Jack McGlynn. I didn't expect it to be Paxton Aronson because he wasn't getting the minutes. But as things stand right now, Jack McGlynn is still on the Union's roster. But Jim Curtin said it right there that that's probably going to be the next 2 Union players to leave are Jack McGlynn and Quinn Sullivan. They're talented players. We've seen in the past rumors with PSV and the Netherlands linked to Jack McGlynn. Jack McGlynn would be fantastic in the Netherlands. That would be the ideal spot for him to develop his game to the next level, where it's a lot more technical in the Netherlands, where, yes, passing matters a whole lot. So I think that would be a fantastic league if Jack McGlynn does eventually land, whether it be with PSV, maybe it's with Ajax, who knows. But I think that's a great league for Jack McGlynn to take the next step. I know we've seen Belgium, we've seen the Bundesliga, and we've seen the Austrian league as our 3 destinations for our 3 homegrown players to go to. And yeah, if you want to consider Austin Trusty going to the championship in England, we've had 4 players that we developed a lot. Then you have Jack DeVries and you have Anthony Fontana all going to Italy. So, yeah, I mean, we're sending players all over in Europe that have come through the academy, even though we've technically only sold 3 players from our team, while the other ones left on a free, or Austin Trusty got sold, traded to Colorado. But Jim Curtin mentions, though, that, yeah, a 3-4-3 and a 3-5-2 are possibilities next season. And I know that idea has been floated out a lot. I know Kevin Kincaid's talked about that on his podcast. He's talked about it on Twitter. And I'm all for us playing a 3-5-2. But my thing is, if we're going to play a 3-5-2 now, if we're considering playing a 3-5-2 now, why didn't we do that when we had Mark McKenzie on the roster? We could have had Mark McKenzie, Jack Elliott, and Jacob Glesnes all playing in a 3-back system. Or last season, we could have been playing with Stuart Finley, Jack Elliott, and Jacob Glesnes. We had 3 good center backs on the rosters the last 2 years. And Stuart Finley, we all know, wants to go get more playing time. You can't fault him for that, and so we sell him to Oxford. Mark McKenzie was definitely going to leave after the season he had in 2020. But, man, we've had center backs on this roster that are good enough to start. Good enough to start in a 3 in the back. And we don't take advantage of it at all with Mark McKenzie and Stuart Finley. And Jim Curtin said it there that Brendan Craig would benefit in 3 in the back. But, spoiler alert, you heard Ernst Tenner say, yeah, we're going to bring in another center back. And so I don't think that bodes well for Brandon Craig, because for what it's worth, I've been told that Ernst Tenner doesn't really view Brandon Craig as an MLS player, more so for the second team. But because we sold Stuart Finley last season, yeah, Brandon was the backup center back to those guys, and we never saw Brandon Craig play any meaningful minutes last season with the first team. I guess part of that's because of Jack Elliott and Jacob Glesnes playing as well as they did. But then you bring in Abasa, who, yeah, he's 18 years old. He's a young player. He's never played in America before. Who knows what we have in him? But you also have Gino Portela, who a lot of you guys are like, who? This is a guy who I don't blame you for not knowing who he is, but he's a left-sided center back, can play as a left back. The Union added him to the roster, I believe, this season. They left him unprotected in the expansion draft. Of course, St. Louis weren't going to take him, but you know, this is a guy who's played in all the lower divisions in Germany. Last season, he only played 1 game with Union 2 against Toronto in the playoffs. But I think we've seen Ernst Tenner hit those lower leagues up. This is a player who could potentially play for the Philadelphia Union. And I know that's crazy to say because he's been with the team for 2 years now, I believe it is. But I think that he'll get opportunities next year with the first team, whether that's playing in a 3 in the back or, you know, whether it's playing as a left back if Kai Wagner is sold. And then Ernst Tanner says, we're going to go out and sign another center back. And so, yeah, I don't think the chances boast well for Brandon Craig with his team next season. And Ernst Tanner showed the ability to sign good center backs in Stuart Finley and Jacob Glesnes. So whatever center back they bring in during the January transfer market, it's going to be interesting to see. Will they be the caliber of players that Jacob and Stuart Finley were? But to hear them say that, yeah, we're going to experiment with a 3-5-2 and a 3-4-3, I think that's fantastic. And going back to Quinn Sullivan, where, yeah, he's not a 8. He's a winger. And so if we do play a 3-4-3, you're going to play Quinn Sullivan in his more natural position out there on the right wing. Ernst Tanner said, an attacker. We're going to go out and get an attacker. Maybe he goes out and gets a winger. Maybe we really are going to go with a 3-4-3 next season. Play somebody on the left wing. I don't know. That's a lot of opportunities for this team. And obviously, if you play a 3-4-3, you only have 1 striker. So Julian Kranze and Mikael Uhre both aren't going to play in a 3-4-3. But Jim Curtin did say, too, with all the success that the 4-4-2 diamond brought us last season, we can't completely abandon it. And he also mentioned that, look, and teams are adjusting to how to adapt to the 4-4-2. And I'll use a football analogy where you look when Lamar Jackson comes in with the Baltimore Ravens and nobody knew how to stop him. But then the last few seasons, people knew how to stop the Ravens offense. And so it makes sense. It happens all the time in sports where you play a certain formation or a certain style. More and more tape on that style. Teams are going to figure out how to break it down. They're going to figure out your pressing cues. And Jim Curtin mentioned it doesn't matter what the formation is. It doesn't matter at all. It's all about getting pressure to the ball. That's the way that Ernst Tanner wants to play, and we all know that. That's what made Brendan Aronson so good. That's why Leon Flach couldn't get taken out of the lineup because of his pressing. And so, yeah, I think just to add that tactical flexibility, I think that's going to be huge for the Union next season. Hopefully Jim Curtin stays to his word, but Ernst Tanner said, it's going to be required to play different formations because we're going to have so many games next season. Point number 3, though, I want to bring up is something that should make Union fans also happy, where Ernst Tanner said, if we lose anybody in the transfer market, we're going to bring in replacements for them. And so, yeah, a lot's been talked about Kai Wagner leaving. And if Bizo plays at all for Cameroon in the World Cup, Bizo could potentially be gone too. So then you're going to need another right back. You're going to need a left back. I know I was just talking about, you could potentially play Gino Portello there on the left side. Yes, Jim Curtin said a lot in the past that Matt Real is the next man up if Kai Wagner leaves. And so I fully expect Matt Real to get that chance at left back. There's a reason why the Union keep bringing Matt back. They trust in him. He's not Kai Wagner, that's for sure, but every time that he's played as a left back or every time he's come into the game, I don't think he's ever disappointed. And so that was good to hear that Ernst Tanner said, no, these players that we're mentioning that we're going to bring in, a center back, a midfielder, an attacker, that's in addition to if we lose anybody in the transfer market. So, yeah, that should make Union fans happy that the Union are going to go out there and spend money. They have a lot of GAM this season. And if they lose players, you best believe Ernst Tanner has a list in his office where he has all these targets that he thinks are realistic players to get. And so don't worry. I mean, I think the only thing that we as Union fans have to worry about is we've seen how long it takes to get players into this country with getting their visa. So hopefully if we do sign a ton of international players, that we can get them in the country a lot faster than what we've been able to do the last couple seasons. But again, just to hear Ernst Tanner say, yes, we will be buying players next season. And if we lose anybody, we will replace them. We 100% will replace them. So I think that should make Union fans happy. Point number 4, though, I want to bring up is this. The Union, they will not stop players from going to Europe. There's plenty of players in the academy, and the Union can replace those players if they sell them to Europe through up-and-coming players in the academy.
There's good players here. I think Europe is getting wiser to that, and literally, Paxton had some games for sure, and he deserves everything he got. But they can see the talent in a training session now, and there's not going to be less of them coming over here to watch. So we have to it's twofold: guard our assets for sure, develop young players, and sometimes it's create a good environment like we've created here, and maybe get the hell out of the way and let the kids go. Because there's that much talent here, and we believe in them, and we'll continue to believe in young players.
Yeah, whether that's Nelson Pierre, Marco Zambrano, you have Andrew Rick, who's the young goalkeeper. I know that's hard to imagine somebody replacing Andre Blake, but look, I talked about it at the beginning of the show where in 2 to 3 years, I can 100% see this roster better in the future than what it currently is, just because Ernst Tanner has been doing that ever since he's been here. He's made the roster better year in, year out. And Andrew Rick's supposed to be the real deal. I'm not saying in 3 years he's taking the job away from Andre Blake, but we've seen the Union develop good goalkeepers in the past. And yeah, goalies play forever. Who's to say Andre Blake doesn't call it a career in the next 2 to 3 years? Say, you know what, I've made a lot of money. I've won a lot of titles. I have a lot of wear and tear on my body. As long as I'm healthy, I'm going to go ahead and call it a career right now. So I don't damage myself for the future. I mean, it's possible, right? I mean, we don't want to think about that, but the Union do have a lot of talent in the academy. And to hear Jim Curtin say, and look, and we've heard him say it in the past about Kai Wagner too, it's not just academy players. It's not just homegrown players. It's players that want to go back to Europe that were once in Europe but didn't get a chance in the first team. They're playing in the lower division, so they come over here to MLS and they redefine their career. And now they get bigger clubs in Europe looking at them. Because let's face it, you guys heard it. Jim Curtin says it all the time that scouts from big clubs are constantly in training, watching these players train. And so there's going to be more and more eyes on the Union, the more and more players we sell to Europe, the more players that we develop, the more trophies we win. Eyes are going to be focused on this club. And so, and to hear him say, yeah, sometimes we just need to get out of the way of the players and let them follow their dreams, because we have an influx of talent in that academy. That's why the Philadelphia Union's academy is the number one in the United States. And to see players constantly get opportunities going to Europe, to watch them be developed into the players they've been for the first team. That's going to make players, whether it be more academy players, whether it be international players, again, that aren't getting chances in those leagues that want to redefine their career, they're going to want to come over here to MLS. And point number 5, the last takeaway that I got from the press conference is this, where the Union's priority, we're in 4 competitions next season: the Champions League, MLS Cup, US Open Cup, and Leagues Cup. But the number one priority next season, it's to win MLS Cup. Because each and every single year, we're getting closer and closer. This season, we get to MLS Cup. We lose it, but we get there. And so if you follow what the Union have done since Ernst Tanner got here, next season, surely we should win MLS Cup. But Jim Curtin also mentioned, yeah, we're going to go for all 4 trophies next season, but MLS Cup is the number one priority.
There are a lot of trophies on the line next year. We're a club that wants to win everything. We're as competitive, 2 competitive guys that want to be in every competition. And to prioritize, look, I think you guys know MLS Cup is still, that's the ultimate in our sport. I think it will remain that way. Champions League is an incredible competition. The Open Cup has a lot of love from me and just history that I respect that trophy as well. So we're going to go for every trophy. Do we have to, like Ernst mentioned, add a few pieces and strengthen the depth of the squad, maybe rotate more and you find different ways to do that? Yes, because we're going to have, what do you think, 50 plus games maybe next season, which is really busy. So, yes, we're discussing that on a daily basis. It's real. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a grind. But, again, those guys in the locker room, these players, step up and amaze us each time. So we'll be ready for it.
Yeah, and I know that point kind of correlates with point number 1, where the Union are going to potentially play over 50 games next season. 4 competitions they're going to be in, so they got to bring in a ton of players. And I was looking at the roster for Seattle when they won the Champions League in 2022. They had 28 players on the roster, and so you've got to have a strong roster. You've got to have a lot of players in different positions where, like Ernst said, it's required to use different formations because of all the games that we have. There's going to be days where the Union only have 2 days rest, and then they play another game. Jim Curtin and Ernst Tanner said, it's going to happen. We're going to have a game in Seattle, and then 2 days after that, we're going to have a game down in Miami. And it's just not realistic to expect the starters from game 1 to play in game 2 down in Miami. So you've got to change up the formation. You've got to bring in players. And to see Seattle won CCL with 28 players. Look, if you guys didn't pay attention to Champions League last season, homegrown players got opportunities last season for Seattle because of suspensions, because of injuries. And so all 28 players next season for the Union will be utilized, whether it be in MLS, whether it be the Champions League, the US Open Cup, the Leagues Cup. Players will get opportunities next season. And I know the number one knock on Jim Curtin is he doesn't rotate. He doesn't bring in subs fast enough. And Jim Curtin's talked about all the data that shows that it's not good to rotate. But next season, when you're in 4 competitions, when you're going to potentially play over 50 games, you have no other choice but to rotate. And so that's why it's crucial for the Union to go out there, to sign new players, to go out there and try different formations. And let's not forget, too, that, yeah, the preseason doesn't matter if they win or lose, but it does matter where hopefully the Union have a lot of these new players they're talking about bringing in on the roster by the time preseason starts so they can learn new formations, so they can learn how to play in the diamond, so they can get acclimated with their team. And so I think next season is going to be fantastic. And I think all 5 of those points were my biggest takeaways. Maybe they were your takeaways too, but it was nice to hear the Union, Ernst Tanner and Jim Curtin say, MLS Cup, that's the number 1 trophy in our league. That's what we want so bad. You don't get remembered for US Open Cups, for winning a conference. You get remembered for winning MLS Cup. And that's the number 1 trophy in the league. And to see Jim Curtin say, yeah, we want MLS Cup next season. But we're also going to try for 4 trophies next season. I mean, that would be crazy, right? To see the Union come away with 4 trophies. I don't think it's going to happen. When you look at their side of the draw in CCL, I think it's very, very favorable for them to potentially get to the final, where they could potentially see LAFC in the semifinal of Champions League, 2-leg Champions League game in LA in Subaru Park. And wouldn't that be a way to get payback on LAFC? I know maybe some of you guys are like, well, yeah, we won't win a trophy. We're only going to be in a final, where we played in LA and we lost the trophy. But I think that would help the players a little bit to knock LAFC out of CCL and go to the final of CCL. They were close. The Union were close when they got knocked out by Club America in 2021. So I think the Union are going to handle all of those competitions well next season. And I know that it's just the start of the offseason, but I'm looking forward to all the news that gets announced by the Union. And I think that was the perfect way to end the 2022 season by the Union. A lot of great questions from Jonathan Tannenwald, Matt DeGeorge, Joe Tanzi. Tom Brogy got a question in there in Zoom. And they asked a lot of good questions. And I'll give credit to Ernst Tanner and Jim Curtin. You know, they don't shy away from questions. They're going to always be upfront. They're always going to be honest. And so, yeah, I don't know if, you know, that helps you guys at all get over the LAFC defeat. Maybe not. But it is good to see that there's a plan in place for next season. And I look forward to hopefully a ton of signings for the Union. And I'm sure none of us are going to hear of this player ever. We're never going to have heard of them. And those are the players that we all love, right? Because they turn out to be hits majority of the time for Ernst Tanner. But I just want to give you guys an update on what the podcast is going to look like the next couple of weeks. So I know I definitely have 2 episodes planned until the end of the season, and they're probably going to be based around the United Soccer Coaches Convention. And the reason I'm not going to give episodes every single week is because my friend Brad and I, we're working on a really, really, really cool idea next season. It's going to take a lot of time learning the software. I don't want to give the idea away. It will be on YouTube. That's all I'll say. I'm still going to do the podcast 100%, but I think it's a way to continue to grow content, a way to continue to cover the Philadelphia Union. So it's going to take a while to learn the software and to figure out what exactly we're doing. But we have a plan in place that we think is going to be game-changing for the way that I cover the Union. Nobody is doing this constantly. So we're really looking forward to this idea that we're brainstorming. And once we finally get it in place and release out to you guys, I will definitely let you know on Twitter. You can follow the social media on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Free Kick Pod. The website, thefreekick.net. So because of that, not going to have episodes every single week, but we will have at least 2 more episodes before the end of the season. Like I said, it's going to have to do with United Soccer Coaches Convention, and it's a great segue into this ad, because you guys don't want to miss the 2023 United Soccer Coaches Convention in Philadelphia from January 11th to the 15th. This convention is the largest gathering of soccer coaches, administrators, and fans in the world. It's the only convention that you can attend sessions crafted with your coaching level and desired topics in mind, presented by world-class educators. Our collection of over 200 lectures and field demonstrations will offer every coach something to bring back to their own training sessions. And look, you guys don't have to be a coach. You can be a fan of the game, because I think that's what I'm looking forward to. Not only taking my podcast there and talking, but it's to learn more about the soccer. Always trying to expand my knowledge of the sport and really get an in-depth look of some of these training sessions, different looks at formations, and just how different coaches, different administrators involved in the sport just take hold of some of these basic things we take for granted. So, yeah, of course I'm looking forward to my podcast being there, but learning. I think that's what I'm extremely, extremely excited to look forward to. And you guys can come and learn from Amanda Vandervert, the president of the USL Super League, Anthony Flores, who is the youth technical director of Philadelphia Union, Becky Burley and Brett Ledbetter from What Drives Winning, Laura Harvey, head coach of OL Reign FC, Dan Abrahams, world-renowned sports psychologist. More presenters will be announced in the months leading up to the convention. Visit www.unitedsoccercoachesconvention.org to register before the price increases. And Phil Wedding's going to be there too. And JP Delacamera is going to be there. So a lot of Union ties here in the Philadelphia Union Convention Center for the United Soccer Coaches Convention. Be sure you guys sign up before those prices continue to rise. Tickets are, I'm sure, selling out fast. And again, just looking forward to this. And hopefully some of you guys show up. And you guys don't have to go there for the whole convention. Go there for a day. They have the list of the presenters, what days they're presenting already on the website. Again, I'll leave a link in the show description. But really looking forward to this. Again, expanding my knowledge of the beautiful game. Of course, looking forward to having my podcast there and doing what I normally do, talk about soccer, interviewing some of these presenters. And of course, would love to meet more of you guys that listen to the podcast. I had a blast meeting a whole bunch of you guys this season for the first time ever, whether it be at a Sons of Ben tailgate, whether it be inside the stadium, whether it be at the watch party at Subaru Park. It was a fantastic season, and looking forward to more of that in the future. But we'll see you guys in a couple weeks. And until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.